Ethan Miller never thought silence could be so loud. He sat in his car outside his home on Maple Avenue, watching the soft snow fall across the windshield. The radio was on, playing a song he couldn't bring himself to turn off, but he wasn't really listening. He just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the faint glow of the porch light that his wife, Claire, always left on for him. It was a light that used to make him feel safe. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, it made him feel uncertain. Maybe it was just the exhaustion from work. Or maybe it was that strange feeling that had been following him for weeks now. Quiet distance between him and Claire that he didn't know how to bridge. They used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. Now, dinner was quiet. The laughter that once filled their little house in Vermont had softened into polite conversations and half smiles. It wasn't anger that filled the space between them. It was something far more painful. It's unspoken distance. Ethan rubbed his temples and sighed. "We're fine," he whispered to himself, as if saying it out loud would make it true. But even he didn't believe it. He finally stepped out of the car and walked up the front steps. The air was crisp, the kind that bites your skin but makes you feel alive. As he reached for the doorknob, he noticed something through the front window. Claire was sitting on the couch, her gaze lost in the flicker of the fireplace. She was holding a cup of tea, staring into the flames like they held some secret only she could see. Ethan paused, watching her. She looked beautiful in that quiet, fragile way that made his chest ache. There was something in her eyes lately, a kind of sadness he didn't understand. He used to think she just needed rest, or maybe a weekend away. But deep down, he knew it was more than that when he stepped inside. She looked up and smiled, the same soft smile that had once stolen his heart. "You're home early," she said. "Yeah," he replied, hanging his coat. Traffic was light. He joined her on the couch, the fire casting warm shadows across the room. For a moment, it almost felt normal. She handed him a cup of tea, just like she always did. "How was your day?" she asked. "Busy," he said. "Yours?" She hesitated for a second. "Quiet. I went through some old boxes in the attic." Ethan nodded, not thinking much of it. But something in her tone made him glance at her. She quickly looked away. He tried to brush it off, but that small pause, that faint tension in her voice, stuck with him. Claire wasn't a liar. She just had a way of hiding what hurt her most. After a few moments, she said softly, "Do you ever think about how fast everything changed? One day we were strangers, and now this is our life." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, sometimes it still feels like yesterday we met at that bookstore." She smiled too, but her eyes seemed far away. "I loved that day," she said. "You were standing in the wrong aisle, looking at cookbooks." He laughed quietly. "And you told me the mystery section was 2 shelves over. I thought you worked there." Claire's laugh filled the room, but it faded too soon. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward, it was heavy, like there was something sitting between them, waiting to be spoken, but never brave enough to leave their lips. Ethan stared at the fire and said, "You've been distant lately." She turned to him, startled. "I have." He nodded slowly. "It's like you're here, but somewhere else at the same time." Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but she only whispered, "I'm sorry." That was all. No explanation, no reassurance. Just that soft apology that somehow made him feel even more lost. Later that night, after Claire went to bed, Ethan stayed downstairs. He scrolled through old photos on his phone, their wedding day, their trip to Banff, the first Christmas in this very living room. Every picture looked perfect, but now he saw something he hadn't before in some of those pictures. Claire's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. He'd always missed it before now. He couldn't unsee it. He put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. He couldn't help wondering, what was she hiding behind that gentle silence? Was it something he'd done? Or was it something from before him? Something that still followed her like a shadow. The next morning, Claire was already gone when he woke up. She left a note on the counter in her neat handwriting, had to run some errands. "Be back by lunch. Don't forget your meeting at noon. Love you." He smiled faintly. but the words didn't comfort him the way they used to. It wasn't the note itself, it was what wasn't written there. There was a warmth missing, the kind that used to jump off the page. That day at work, Ethan couldn't focus. Numbers and deadlines blurred together. He kept replaying her voice in his head, how it wavered slightly last night when she said, "I'm sorry." When he got home that evening, he found her in the garden kneeling by the rose bushes. The sun was setting behind her, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. She looked peaceful, almost serene. For a moment he wanted to forget everything to believe that whatever distance had come between them would fade on its own. But deep down, he knew something was coming. He didn't know what it was yet, but it was close, waiting quietly just beyond the horizon of their lives, and soon. That hidden truth would change everything before the distance. Before the quiet stares across the dinner table, there had been laughter. So much laughter. Ethan could still remember the day he met Claire as clearly as if it were yesterday. It was a late autumn afternoon in Burlington. The air smelled like rain and roasted coffee, and he ducked into a small bookstore to escape the drizzle. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, maybe a distraction. Maybe a reason not to think about how lonely he'd been lately. He'd been flipping through a book he didn't even plan to buy when he heard a gentle voice say, "You're holding it upside down." He looked up, and there she was, Claire. A wool scarf wrapped around her neck, her hair tucked under a beige coat, eyes that seemed to hold both warmth and mystery. She smiled, just a little, but enough to make the gray day outside seem lighter. "That's one way to read a mystery," she said playfully. Ethan laughed, embarrassed. "Guess I'm not much of a detective." They ended up talking for almost an hour that day about books, travel, and everything in between. She told him she loved stories that made her feel something, and he admitted he hadn't read a full novel in years. When they finally walked outside, the rain had stopped and the city felt quieter, as if it had paused just for them. That was how it started, in the months that followed. Their connection grew naturally, like to people who had been searching for each other without knowing it. They shared simple joys. Sunday walks by the lake, late night talks about dreams they were too shy to say out loud, and quiet dinners where words weren't even necessary. Ethan often thought that what made Claire special wasn't just her kindness, was the way she saw people. She listened as if every word mattered. With her, even silence felt meaningful. But even then, there had been moments, small ones, that Ethan now remembered with a strange ache. Like the night they sat by the fire during their first winter together. Snow was falling outside, and she'd told him about her childhood in a small town up north. Her father was a carpenter, her mother a schoolteacher. She said she'd left home young to start fresh, and when Ethan asked why, she smiled faintly and said, "I just needed to let go of some memories." At the time, he didn't think much of it. Everyone had their past. Everyone had things they didn't want to relive. But now, that memory returned to him like a whisper he hadn't listened to carefully enough. He remembered how, even back then, Claire had nights when she seemed distant. She'd stare out the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, lost in a world he couldn't see. When he'd ask what was wrong, she'd simply smile and say, "I'm fine." Ethan used to think it was just her way, gentle, private, introspective. He never pushed. He wanted her to feel safe, not cornered. But sometimes he wondered what she wasn't telling him. Their love had been built on trust, or so he thought. But looking back, maybe it had been built on something else. To hope that love could heal what words couldn't. Hope that the future would erase the pain of the past. Now, as he sat in their living room looking at the same woman he'd fallen for in that bookstore, Ethan realized how fragile hope could be when truth stayed hidden beneath it. He reached for one of their photos, albums on the shelf a thick. Worn book filled with memories of trips, birthdays, and little moments that had once defined their life together. He flipped to the first page. There they were, smiling in front of a lighthouse on Prince Edward Island. He remembered how windy it had been that day. How Claire's scarf had blown across her face and made her laugh uncontrollably. He traced the photo with his thumb. That laughter, he hadn't heard it in months. And then another image caught his eye. It was from their engagement party. Claire was holding a small box, a gift from her friend, but there was something about her expression in that picture. The joy was there, but behind it, there was something else. A hesitation. Ethan closed the album and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Maybe love wasn't just about what you shared. It was also about what you didn't, single quotes. He thought about the way she'd said, "I'm sorry" last night. Not "I'm fine," not "it's nothing," just "I'm sorry." It sounded less like an apology for being distant and more like an apology for something she couldn't yet say. The next morning, as they ate breakfast together, Ethan tried to focus on normal things, the weather, the knee. Ethan didn't know why he found himself wandering into the small park near their house that evening. The winter air was sharp, crisp enough to make his cheeks tingle, but something had drawn him here. Maybe it was the memory of past walks with Claire, or the quiet need to escape the restless hum of the house that had suddenly begun to feel too small. The park was almost empty, save for a few distant joggers and a solitary dog barking far off near the frozen pond. He walked along the snow-dusted path, thinking of Claire, and wondering if she had felt the same restless pull tonight as he rounded the corner near the swings. He noticed a figure crouched by the edge of the pond. At first he thought it was just a passerby, but as he got closer, his heart skipped a beat. It was Claire. She looked up and caught his eye, a small, surprised smile spreading across her face. She wore her wool coat and scarf, hair slightly mussed by the wind, cheeks pink from the cold. It was an image he could have memorized forever, familiar, yet somehow new. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice carrying over the quiet crunch of snow underfoot. "Claire," he breathed, almost forgetting to speak. For a few moments, they simply looked at each other, the distance between them filled not with tension but a strange, unspoken relief. It was as if the universe had pressed pause for them, two people standing alone, yet together, in a world that suddenly felt still. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked finally, trying to sound casual, though his chest felt tight. Claire shrugged, glancing back at the pond. "I needed some air. It's hard to think sometimes." He nodded slowly, understanding more than she knew. "I could say the same thing." They walked side by side, letting their steps crunch over the frozen snow. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was reflective, like a bridge connecting them after weeks of distance. Then something small happened that neither of them could have predicted. A stray scarf caught by the wind blew across the path. Ethan instinctively reached out, catching it just before it fell into the pond. Claire's eyes widened and a soft laugh escaped her. "That scarf was my favorite," she admitted, taking it back from him. Their fingers brushed lightly, and it was enough to spark a warmth neither had felt in weeks. For a moment, it was like the months of tension never existed. Their laughter mingled with the crisp evening air, echoing across the frozen pond, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the old closeness return. They stopped near a bench, snow falling lightly around them. Claire looked at him, her eyes serious now, holding a depth that made his heart ache. "Ethan," she said quietly, I've been thinking about us, about how things have felt lately." He nodded. "I've been thinking too. I feel like something's been between us and I don't know how to reach you." Claire looked down, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "It's not you, it's me. I've been holding on to things I should have told you a long time ago. Things from before we met. I wasn't brave enough to share them." Ethan's chest tightened. He had always sensed that some part of her remained unreachable. And now he realized he was about to finally see the truth. He took a deep breath. "Claire, whatever it is, I want to know. I need to know. Because I love you I don't want anything to come between us." Her eyes glistened in the fading sunlight, and for the first time she seemed to relax, letting the weight she had carried spill just a little. "It's hard to explain," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's part of my past. Part of who I was before we met. I thought I could leave it behind, but it hasn't been that simple." Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand. "Then we'll face it together," he said. His voice was steady, though inside, his heart raced. "Whatever it is, it doesn't change how I feel about you." Claire looked at him, tears threatening but held back by a small, hopeful smile. "I didn't know if I could ever tell you. I didn't want to lose what we have." "You won't lose me," he whispered. "Not now, not ever." The snow fell more steadily around them, softening the world into a quiet, glowing haze. In that moment, the past seemed to fade, and the present held only their hands, their hearts, and the unspoken promise of honesty. They sat on the bench for a while, talking quietly about small things, at first their favorite memories, plans for the weekend, but the energy between them had shifted. It wasn't just nostalgia anymore. It was understanding, recognition of the unspoken truth that had quietly shaped their lives. And in that small, unexpected evening, Ethan realized something important. Love didn't always need grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it only needed a shared moment, a spark, to remind you of why it mattered so deeply. He looked at Claire and saw not only the woman he had married, but the one he had fallen for, this same gentle, strong, thoughtful woman who had first caught his attention in a bookstore years ago. Only now he understood that her silence, her hesitation, had always been a part of her story. And part of loving her was being patient enough to wait for her to share it. That night, walking home hand in hand, Ethan felt the warmth return, not the kind that comes from a fire or a cup of tea, but the kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you belong. Some truths were still hidden. Yes, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. And somehow the thought of it made everything feel brighter again that night. After their walk through the snow, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind replayed every moment with Claire, every glance, every hesitant word. The warmth of holding her hand lingered in his chest, but so did the weight of the unknown. What was she holding back? He found her sitting at the kitchen table when he went downstairs, a single lamp casting a soft glow over her face. A cup of tea sat untouched in front of her. She looked up at him and smiled faintly, a smile that carried both relief and fear. "Can't sleep either?" he asked quietly, sliding into the chair across from her. She shook her head. "Just thinking." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but he could hear the tension in it. Ethan wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but something in her posture stopped him. She seemed fragile tonight, like a delicate glass figure he didn't want to break. I feel like I need to tell you something," she began, her fingers twisting the edge of her scarf nervously. "Something I should have shared long ago." He leaned forward slightly, careful not to rush her. "You don't have to be afraid. I want to hear it, Claire. Whatever it is, I'm here." She took a deep breath, her eyes dropping to the table. "Before we met, there was someone else, someone I cared about deeply. His name was Daniel, and something happened between us that I've carried with me ever since." Ethan's throat tightened. He had expected a story, a simple explanation, but not the weight in her voice, the way her words trembled. "What happened?" he asked gently. He didn't want to push, but he wanted to understand her dot. Claire looked up at him, tears brimming but not falling. "It wasn't my fault, but it felt like it was. I tried to help him, tried to be there for him, but one night, he left and he never came back. I felt responsible. I blamed myself for so long. And when I met you, I wanted a fresh start. I wanted to be someone better, someone whole. I didn't know how to tell you that part of my past was still alive in my heart." Ethan felt a mix of emotions, sorrow, empathy, even a flicker of fear. But above all, there was a quiet, powerful understanding. He reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "Claire," he said softly, "thank you for telling me. I can see how much this has weighed on you. But I need you to know something. I love you. All of you. Past, present, everything. Nothing in your history can change that." She looked at him, her lips trembling into a small, almost incredulous smile. "You mean that?" "Every word," he said firmly. "I didn't marry you for the story you wanted to tell me. I married you for who you are right now, with me, here. And nothing you've lived through changes that. For a long moment, they sat in silence, holding hands across the table. The warmth of their touch seemed to fill the room, pushing away the tension that had built up for weeks. "I've been so afraid," Claire whispered. "Afraid that if I told you, it would change how you see me. Afraid that I'd lose what we have." "You won't lose me," Ethan said, his voice steady yet tender. "We're not defined by the past we can't change. We're defined by the choices we make now. I choose you." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, they weren't just sorrowful, they were filled with relief, gratitude, and a quiet joy. She squeezed his hand, letting herself lean into the safety he offered. "I didn't realize how much holding it in, how much hiding it hurt me," she admitted. "I thought I could protect us by keeping it inside, but maybe it only built walls between us." Ethan nodded. "I felt that too," he confessed. "I've been scared, unsure, wondering what I didn't know about you. But now that I do, I feel closer to you than ever. It's strange, painful, yes, but it's also freeing." They sat there for what felt like hours, talking in whispers about everything and nothing. They didn't need to fill the silence with grand statements or dramatic confessions. Just speaking the truth, sharing the weight of emotions long held in secret, was enough finally. Claire leaned forward, resting her forehead gently against Ethan's. "I've wanted this for so long," she said softly. "To feel like I can be fully myself with you without fear." "You always can," he whispered back. "And I promise I'll never let you feel alone in this again." Outside. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of quiet knocking at the door. He frowned. It wasn't usual for anyone to come by so early, and he certainly hadn't expected deliveries. Opening the door, he found a small envelope resting on the doormat. There was no return address, just his wife's name written neatly across the front. His heart skipped a beat as he picked it up. Something about the simplicity of it, the plain white paper. The careful handwriting felt like it carried more weight than the envelope deserved. He brought it inside and sat at the kitchen table, the familiar warmth of the lamplight illuminating the small note. He hesitated, half afraid to open it, half driven by the urge to finally see what it contained. Slowly, he broke the seal. Inside was a letter, and as he unfolded it, his eyes immediately caught on Claire's handwriting. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means the past has finally found its way into our present. I didn't know how to tell you before, and I wasn't sure I ever could. But hiding it hasn't made it easier. It's only built walls between us that I can't bear anymore." Ethan's chest tightened. He could feel the emotion in every loop of her pen, every careful word. "You need to know that before we met, I loved someone. His name was Daniel. We shared moments that mattered, moments I will always carry. But something happened that I couldn't control, something that left me with a grief I've carried silently. I thought I could move past it, that it would fade in time. I believed I could start over with you and be free of it." Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he continued reading, his pulse quickening, not with fear, but with anticipation. "I see now that the past isn't something you leave behind. It's something you bring with you. I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want you to see me differently. But I can't hide it anymore. Not from the person I love most." Ethan looked up from the letter. Claire was standing at the doorway, her eyes soft but filled with fear. She had been watching him read, waiting for his reaction. "I love you, Ethan, more deeply than I can ever explain. I only hope that by telling you the truth, we can be stronger, closer, more honest. I want us to face life together without shadows, without secrets." Always, Claire. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. Ethan's gaze lifted from the letter to her face, and for the first time in weeks, he truly saw her not just as his wife, but as the woman who had carried her burdens quietly, who had loved him fiercely even while fearing she could lose him. Without a word, he stood and walked toward her. Claire's shoulders tensed, and she braced herself. "Eh?" As if she expected him to pull away or leave. Instead, Ethan took her hands in his. "Claire," he said gently, "you think this would change me? That the truth would make me see you differently? But it doesn't. It only makes me love you more." Her eyes widened, tears spilling over despite her efforts to hold them back. "You mean that?" she whispered. "Every word," he replied firmly. "We all have a past. It's the present we choose to share and the future we build together that matters. And right now, I choose you. I choose us." Claire's hands trembled in his, and for a long moment, they stood like that, connected by more than words. The letter had bridged a gap that weeks of quiet distance had made feel insurmountable. "I've been so afraid," she admitted finally, her voice breaking. "Afraid that telling you would make you leave. Afraid that you'd think I wasn't." Ethan shook his head, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "You've always been whole to me," he said softly. "Even in the moments you thought you weren't. Even with the past you've carried. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you." She let out a shaky breath, leaning into him, allowing herself to be held. "I've never felt this safe," she murmured. "I didn't know it was possible to let someone in completely, to trust them with everything." "Then let me in," Ethan whispered back, pulling her close. "All of it. The past, the fears, everything you've kept inside. I'll be here, and I'm not going anywhere." The tension that had built over weeks, the quiet distance, the unspoken fears, they all began to melt away. In its place grew a sense of closeness and trust that felt more profound than either of them had expected. They spent the rest of the evening at the kitchen table, not rushing, not trying to solve everything at once. They spoke quietly, carefully, about small memories, the emotions that had gone unexpressed, and the gentle hopes they carried for the future. Ethan realized something in that moment. Love wasn't about never being afraid or never having a past. It was about choosing to face the uncertainty together. It was about courage, to be honest. To share the deepest parts of yourself and the courage to accept someone else fully. Without judgment, Claire's hand in his felt warmer than the fire that burned in the fireplace behind them. And in that quiet, shared space, with her truth finally spoken and received with love, Ethan felt the turning point of their relationship, an emotional shift that could not be undone. A bond strengthened by honesty and acceptance. Outside, the snow continued to fall softly, blanketing the world in quiet, gentle peace. Inside, Ethan and Claire held on to each other, feeling the power of truth, the relief of shared vulnerability, and the quiet certainty that no matter what had come before, they would face whatever was next together the next morning. Sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, painting warm streaks across the living room. Ethan awoke to the gentle hum of the heater and the quiet rustle of Claire moving around the kitchen. The weight that had pressed on his chest for weeks felt lighter now, replaced by something he hadn't realized he'd been missing: calm, steady certainty. He watched her from the doorway for a moment. She was humming softly, stirring coffee in a mug, a faint smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in what felt like months, everything seemed right. Not perfect, but right. Claire turned at the sound of him clearing his throat and grinned. "Good morning. Sleep well?" "Better than I have in a long time," he replied, stepping closer. She set the mug down and walked to meet him in the middle of the room. Their hands found each other easily, naturally, like they had never been apart. There were no grand words needed, no awkward silences, just a quiet acknowledgement of the understanding that had taken weeks to form. "I can't believe how heavy everything felt before," Claire whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I carried so much alone, thinking I had to protect you from it, but it only pushed us apart." Ethan nodded, brushing his thumb gently across her knuckles. "We both felt that distance. I didn't understand it at first, and I thought maybe it was something I did. But it wasn't. It was just life and past experiences and fear." Her eyes glistened. "I was so afraid I'd ruin what we had." "You didn't," he said softly. "You were honest when it mattered. And that honesty, it's brought us closer than ever." For a long moment, they stood there quietly, letting the comfort of each other's presence fill the space. There was no rush to speak, no urgency to solve anything else. The revelation of the past, the unspoken truths, And the letter that had finally opened the door between them had created a new kind of intimacy, one built not on perfection, but on acceptance. Later that day, they decided to take a walk. The sky was pale blue, the snow still crisp and untouched in places, and the air carried the gentle scent of winter evergreens. They moved slowly, side by side, their scarves tucked neatly, hands occasionally brushing. Each touch was light, deliberate, and filled with quiet reassurance. "Do you remember that first winter we walked along the lake?" Claire asked suddenly, her breath visible in the cold air. Ethan smiled. "How could I forget? You kept laughing because the wind kept blowing your scarf into your face." She laughed softly, and for a moment it was the same laughter that had first drawn him to her years ago. "I thought you'd think I was silly," she said, smiling. "I did not," he replied. "I thought you were." "Wonderful." Even then, they fell silent, letting the memories wash over them. The nostalgia wasn't bittersweet, was comforting, a reminder of the foundation they had built together. Every shared experience, every quiet moment of understanding, had led to this renewed closeness as they returned home. They passed by this small park where the turning point of their renewed connection had begun. The pond was frozen solid, and the swings swayed lightly in the breeze. They paused for a moment, watching the reflection of the pale afternoon sky on the ice. Ethan took Claire's hand and squeezed gently. "I think the hardest moments are often the ones that remind us what really matters," he said. "We've faced the past and we've faced our fears, and somehow we're stronger because of it." Claire nodded, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "I never want to feel that distance again. I want us to always be open no matter what." "You have my word," Ethan said, smiling down at her. "We'll face everything together. No walls, no secrets, just us." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat in the living room with a warm blanket draped across their laps. Outside, the world was quiet, blanketed in soft snow. Inside, the house was filled with a calm energy, a mix of relief, hope, and love that felt like it had been waiting for this very moment. Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder. "I've never felt more at peace," she murmured. He kissed the top of her head gently. "Neither have I," he said. "It's amazing how things change when you let the truth in." They didn't need to speak anymore. Words had done their work.